Okay, so today's topic is around mid-year trends. We'll talk in a moment about what that means, but it's our big predictions for what's going to happen in the latter half of this year and into 2023 as well. It's sort of crazy that we're this deep into 2022. It feels like this year's actually gone by pretty quickly, I would say. And there's been a whole lot of things that are both opportunities and challenges for the industry. But before we get into that, did you see this, guys, that LA looks like it's about to bring back its mask mandates, including at places like restaurants, with potentially other cities to follow? So
I've seen articles, but they didn't, right? Like,
not yet.
Yeah.
They're thinking it could be imminent.
Yeah.
I think the San Diego School District and I think LAUSD is requiring it now. Someone can maybe fact check us on that. But the overwhelming thought is that there's probably going to be a mandate coming back. And I almost wonder, obviously this is going to depend city by city, but do you think if a mandate were brought that you would largely have compliance or non-compliance? Like, do you think a lot of businesses and people just say, I don't care what they say, I'm just going to ignore it? Or do you think people would really stick to it? Like Chicago is a good example. If city of Chicago said mask mandates are back, do you think you'd have over 50% compliance?
I mean, Chicago's been pretty good about it. I think. Yeah, like I don't know.
It would depend on the places. Like the schools, the students have not stopped wearing them. Like the vast majority of students.
Restaurants as an example.
Yeah, I think that the majority of the city would just be like, okay, if I have to wear it to walk in, whatever.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, so it's actually quite interesting, right? If you look at the data from LA County Public Health Department, here's two charts. So this really all is about BA5, right? And if you look at the chart on the right, you could see the positivity rate from COVID tests has like gone through the roof. For basically almost 1 out of every 6 people tested for COVID right now is testing positive, which is way higher than Los Angeles and other cities we're seeing just a few months ago. At the same time, the number of COVID tests done on a daily basis has sort of dropped precipitously from the levels where it was maybe just a month and a half ago as well. So we're, in the case of LA, where we're thinking about maybe bringing back mask mandates, we're testing far fewer people, but when we do test them, the positivity rate is much higher. But it seems like everyone has COVID right now, right? I mean,
I just got over it, so
yeah. I would bet probably to a person, every single person that's on this webinar with us right now, either has had COVID or knows someone that has COVID currently, right? Mm-hmm. It's basically everywhere again.
Well, it was interesting too. Dr. Arwadi from here in Chicago did an interview with the New York Times, and they asked her that, why do we not have mask mandates back in place if cases are rising? And she said, right now, the thinking is that, we kind of need to save them for the fall and winter. If things get really bad, you can't exhaust people on some of these mandates, over and over again. And then, when you really need to put them in place, people don't, comply with them. So at least the thinking here in Chicago is they're almost saving them, these mandates just in case things get really bad in the fall and winter.
Yeah. So, hey, here's a little just technical glitch. For some reason, I'm not able to see chat. So if I could ask everyone to just try hitting the chat button and do that thing, say hi where you're chatting in from, just to make sure that things are working. That would be great. Mike, Claire, are you seeing any chats come through?
Actually, that's no. The only option I see is hosts and panelists or talking to us too.
Huh. So I wonder, I think chat is broken.
No.
Yeah.
No, this would be such a good day.
I know. I really want to hear what
I was so excited
about some of this stuff. Yeah.
So for any of our Datassential folks that help at the webinar behind the scenes, if you're able to maybe go into this webinar and see if there's some chat feature that was disabled, maybe we can turn it back on again or something. But looks like it's chat is not coming through for some reason. So
this is so strange.
And I was going to say, please chat and let us know what happens when you try to chat, but that obviously is not going to work either.
Yeah.
So I'm getting a lot of people raising their hands, but hard to tell what that does. Okay, well, I think we need to continue and hopefully we get the chat restored quickly. Let's see what happens. Okay, I wanted to just provide this is from me sort of personally, which is, I finally got around this last week to watching the 2 Paddington movies, which I'd heard for a long time were awesome. And then I saw like that Nicolas Cage movie recently where they referenced Paddington 2 and how great it was. I heard like when the first one came out, someone said, "Oh, this movie's awesome," and it gets amazing reviews. Sort of ignored it. It seemed like a kid's thing. If you haven't seen the Paddington movies, you have to see them. They are so incredibly fabulous and unbelievably heartwarming. And I feel like we live in a world that's like incredibly divided and full of cynicism. This will like melt all that away in a heartbeat. It is the most like well-intentioned, good-natured, uplifting, love humanity, 90 minutes that you'll ever experience. So I like the second one more than the first, but they're both absolutely fantastic. So that's nothing to do with food other than the fact that he likes marmalade sandwiches. But definitely go check out the Paddington movies there. And I think one of them, the first one's on Netflix and the second one's on HBO Max. So if you have those services, it won't even cost you a dime. Totally worth doing. Mike, Claire, either one of you watched these movies?
Not seen them. I've heard that. I have a friend who absolutely loves them, but yeah.
They were like so incredibly just fantastic. I can't say enough. Like I hope that Datassential can be like the Paddington of knowledge companies or something. It's the best. Okay.
I remember number 2, they were talking about like a possible Best Picture nomination. People.
It deserves every Best Picture award. It's so fantastic. So you're going to learn a lot of stuff today, everyone, that Mike and Claire are going to share. But please do not lose the recommendation to watch these 2 movies. You're going to thank us for it. Okay, so we got some new stuff happening in Report Pro. Many of you, actually a majority of you, I think actually subscribe to Report Pro now, which is great. There's a wonderful new creative concepts on what's happening around value and what dollar and discount stores, the role that they're playing as we move into a bit more of a value-driven economy. And we have that was actually a funny little glitch there. And we have a new deep dive into the mid-scale segment in food service, right? So diners and family restaurants and whatnot. But my point here is not talking about mid-scale specifically. It's that pretty much every sector of food service is covered exhaustively now in Report Pro. Every segment of the industry, every type of operation, and pretty much every topic imaginable. So if you haven't had a chance to check out Report Pro in the last couple of weeks, give it a look. There's a ton of new stuff there. But the thing that's really on the platform for today and that we're going to talk about is this brand new Midyear Trend Report, the 2022 edition, which literally just got published a couple of hours ago. So it is brand new to Report Pro. We can't obviously cover the entire thing because it is a piece of premium content, but we are going to spend some time today going over some of the key highlights that we think are really, really interesting. Before we do that, I hope the poll works. I'm going to ask all of you to join us in on an exercise. It's sort of a bummer we don't get chat because we have so much chat-friendly content today. But we brought in 2 amazing artists from Miami and Connecticut, a person named Ruben and a person named Miguel, to create an amazing mural for Datassential in our offices, which spans, this floor to ceiling, and it's like 70 feet wide. And you can sort of get a sense of what it sort of looks like over here. And it's just filled, chock full of the history of Datassential and things that we care about over here and some of the fun things we've done in the past and food trends and whatnot. And here's sort of a panoramic view of it. It's a massive thing, right? You can sort of see like the kitchen area in the background to give you a sense of scale. And we love it. So the next time you're in Chicago, please stop by, come visit us, check out the mural. We have a brand new office in the West Loop, which is really, really fantastic. But what we haven't done is we haven't given this amazing work of art a name yet. And every amazing masterpiece deserves a name. So I hope the poll could work, because what I'd like to do is to get all of you to help us name this thing. So I'm going to show you a few different name options, and please vote on the name you like best, and that will become the name of our new official Datassential office mural. So we'll see if this thing works.
It came up at least, so.
All right, we're getting
a good sign.
So between the options that we have, Mike and Claire, food for thought, Jedi mind tricks, may the forks be with you, simply smarter, which is the name of this very webinar right now, or galactic flavors. Any guesses what the top vote getter will be?
May the forks be with you.
Claire, do you concur?
Yep. I mean, that's what I'm hoping. So but that might be my bias showing up.
So I'm going to give it another 5 seconds. If you haven't voted yet, you have 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And yeah, with an overwhelming share of the vote, may the forks be with you. Is it? So thank you all. You've just named this masterpiece for us, and that's it. So definitely stop by our new office, say hi to all of us, and take a selfie with this mural. It is really, really quite spectacular. I think it's like 70 feet or maybe 80 feet wide. It's like super, super long. Really cool. Okay, let's talk mid-year trends. So Mike, you included this picture of a pug in an ice cream cone. I'd like to understand why.
I did not. You added this picture.
Okay, you're right. I added that picture instead. I was going to see if I can catch you out on the spot. So let's talk mid-year trends.
All right. And before we get to the actual mid-year trend report, we're going to cover some of the weird and wacky trends that we always cover on the webinar. Just, things we've been seeing in the industry, stuff to kind of, keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening out there. And the first thing I wanted to mention is that I had the opportunity last week to go to Washington and actually tour raspberry farms around the state. Washington produces a huge amount of raspberries, something I want to say like 70, 80, 90% of the raspberries that we eat in this country. And if you love raspberries, you'll be happy to know that the farm report is very good this year. So last year was not great. It was a super hot season and raspberries hate heat. So they shriveled up and died on the vine last year. Whereas this year things are a bit cooler. So the raspberry report, excuse me, is pretty strong. The one thing I wanted to say, I think the most fun fact that I learned on the trip is that, so if you look at the raspberry there, kind of in, the center, you see that little, hole there. That's where the raspberry attaches to the actual raspberry vine. I don't know, Claire, Jack, I wish we had the chat because I bet somebody would know this. Do you know what the little cone is that attaches to the raspberry that actually keeps it on the vine? This is the funnest fact that I learned. Oh,
I do not, and I grow raspberries. I have no idea what it's called.
really? Oh, good. Then this will be a fun fact as you tour your garden. So it's called a peduncle. That's the name of it.
Definitely.
So if you're ever at trivia and they ask how do raspberries attach to raspberry vines, the answer is through the peduncle. And if we go to the next slide here, I think Jack is trying to figure out how to get our chat.
I'm trying to figure out the chat thing.
Yeah.
So if anyone inside Datassential knows how to fix the chat thing, Slack me and I'll try to do it here. Anyways, Mike, let's go on.
And then, so it was actually interesting when we were touring the raspberry farms. One of the things that a lot of the raspberry farms also grow blueberries. Blueberries are a lot easier to grow than raspberries. And so the way that the one farm that we toured kept pests away from their blueberries is they actually had falcons come in. So they had falconry experts coming in and actually using falcons to drive off any other birds on the farm. And so actually, that kind of relates to something that was in the news this week, which is, I'm not even going to try to pronounce this farm, but it's a vineyard out of Cape Town, South Africa. And they actually use ducks to keep pests away from their vineyards. So they have 1,600 ducks that make a 14-day rotation through the vineyards, and it keeps out all the pests. The idea actually came from Asian rice paddies, which often use ducks, and it's become really popular throughout the wine industry because it's natural. So you don't have to use any types of pesticides or anything like that. And so the winery actually says they're going to start raising ducks and selling them to other vineyards because it's become such a popular option.
So it's funny, these ducks almost don't look real.
They look like wooden
there should
ducks
be like
or
an
something.
umbrella
Yeah,
on the other end of all
that's
of them
true.
or something.
And then I thought this was an interesting concept out of Vancouver. So it's called Club Kitchen. It's kind of like a ghost kitchen meets, a kitchen incubator. So the idea is they have 13 different private kitchens in the facility that you can rent out. And it's pretty cheap. I think they said startup costs in general are about $50K for each operator, and really quick to start up your own brand. So about 2 to 3 weeks that you can be working. But the interesting thing about it is it's not just, we've seen a bunch of these ghost kitchens where, either existing brands or new brands are opening up a brand and then doing delivery, options through the kitchen. But this one actually has the consumer facing element as well. So, a lot of the ghost kitchens that we see are, in weird places that consumers would never visit. This is actually in a really popular neighborhood in Vancouver. And the idea is that people can, go into this front area of the concept and actually purchase foods from those 13 different operators. And everything is set up for that operator. So, they have agreements in place with all of the third-party delivery services. They pretty much take care of, any of that type of, thing that you need. And it's really just on you to create the food. That's kind of your whole MO that you have to do back of house.
So this exists, or this is a concept that
it does? Yeah. So I believe if it didn't just open, it's just about to open in Vancouver, and I believe they have 2 more on the way. Actually,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I think this is really interesting and cool. Actually, if you've been through the Detroit Metro Airport, you might have seen this. So Delta started using these personalized information boards, which are through a company called Misapplied Sciences. And the board itself is actually called the Parallel Reality Board. And it can actually display different information that's personalized to 100 different people who are looking at the board. So if 100 different people are looking at this board at the same time, they all see personalized information specific to them. So when is your flight? What time does it leave? So you can see on the board there, if Liz is looking at it, it says, "Hello, Liz." And the way that it works is, I'm not gonna, try to overly explain this technology. Number one, they use facial recognition technology to know who's looking at it. And then number two, I believe that the pixels in the board itself are actually directly aimed at each individual person. And so that's how they're able to aim that, customized information to the specific person. The idea they said behind it is that airports are just, you have way too many flights leaving. So you have, all of these flight boards that are just, inundating you with all of this information. And so they were trying to figure out a way to personalize it a little bit more. And then the other thing that was happening is that you need all this information in the airport. Is your gate changing? What time, is your gate leaving and everything? And so they said, instead of having all of the people in an airport being on their phone the entire time, you could actually have personalized information on these boards throughout the airport. And I think you could kind of see, the option. Oh, was chat working? Looks like maybe we had it working.
Our amazing Kendra just sent me instructions to re-enable chat. So, down with Zoom and up with Kendra. Thank you for fixing that.
All of a sudden, I just saw a bunch of chat boxes.
So everyone, please chat right on in. Where you're chatting in from, say hi to everybody, and let's get this thing going. Our apologies for the technical difficulties. Kendra, you are a lifesaver.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thanks, Kendra.
Wait, Mike, I don't understand this. So 100 people could be looking at this and they all see something different?
I'll see something different. So we could be standing next to each other and I would see hi Mike and my information and you would see hi Jack and your.
That's not possible.
I don't know. Bring it up with Misapplied Sciences.
So they have cameras that recognize you and then they see where you're standing.
I believe that.
And they change the image and they structure the image so that depending on where you're standing, you see something slightly different?
Yes, exactly. The article doesn't have a lot of information about kind of the technology, how it works itself, but that description is correct. Yeah, 100 people looking at this will see 100 different things.
So can you imagine that for like a movie theater in the future?
Or a menu board, imagine walking
different movies playing at the same time?
Exactly. Oh, that'd be great. The movie itself playing that.
And you just wear headphones or something? I mean,
but I feel like it would be interesting. Yeah, you walk into a restaurant and you see a personalized menu board for you, or even just, displaying things in different languages, I think is a case.
And this is real?
It's real, yeah. So they actually used it at Detroit Metro Airport and it was incredibly popular. They said that, there's a lot of technologies I feel like that we kind of put in places that don't necessarily showcase to the consumer, how it's beneficial to them, but consumers really loved it. And across generations, they said.
It's sort of spooky too, though, isn't it? It's sort of like, hey, Mike, I know exactly what you're doing. at
They
all
did say
times.
that. They mentioned that in the article, that there's some people that are worried about privacy issues.
But it starts spooky and then it's just becomes something you're used to. Like Google
Yeah, I think that's
the
true.
airport, and I was like, stop being creepy. And now I'm like, "Ooh, when should I leave? So
Well, that just means you got used to the lack of privacy. It doesn't mean there's no less a lack of privacy,
I just
right?
think we'll get used to it.
Well, look, China installed something like 300 million facial recognition AI cameras to monitor everybody. I don't know. This would scare me if I saw this, but okay. Anyways,
And then I'm kind of on a similar tack. So I think there's like a through line through a lot of this. And actually there's an expert who was quoted in this article that mentioned this specific technology, which is basically that in the future, we're not always going to use our phone to be our source of digital information. It's just going to be part of the world, for us, whether that's through, menu boards or information boards like we just saw, or in this case, they've actually developed some augmented reality contact lenses now. So this is a company out of California called Mojo Vision. And so you probably see, the virtual reality goggles or augmented reality goggles, or even some of the eyeglasses that, Amazon puts out there that allows you to augment your reality with information. These are the first contact lenses that actually do it. And it's insanely amazing technology because it's all in the contact lens itself. So it's not just that the screen is in the contact lens, and the screen is great. It's actually a higher resolution than an iPhone, but the battery is in the contact lens itself too. So all of the power is actually coming from the contact lens. And so the guy who wrote the article that mentioned, this development actually works in the augmented reality field. And the thing he said is, in the future, we're not going to use our phone to be kind of our source of information for everything that we need in the future. It'll just be more a part of our world, which I think, as Claire just mentioned, it starts off creepy and then it just becomes something that's kind of, a part of our reality. And I think that's what's going to happen in the future when it comes to augmented reality.
would you do a neural implant if it was proven safe?
I don't know if I don't know. I'd have to really see the benefits of it, but
I mean, to have all the knowledge of the internet in your brain?
it would be crazy, yeah. And then this is going to be one for the chat, I believe. But so this is a new beer variety that was done in Singapore with a brewery called Brewworks, and it actually uses sewage. So they've taken recycled sewage, created recycled sewage water, so it's filtered water, and then they use that to create this beer. And so they did it, it's actually on the market. You can see it, in restaurants throughout Singapore. I believe it's on retail shelves through July, they said it was going to be. But the idea was that, Singapore is kind of, already getting worried about water scarcity on the island itself. So they're trying to come up with new ideas to make sure that their water is secure in the future. There was a stat in the article that said 2.7 billion people find water to be scarce at least once a month out of the year. And so you're going to see more stuff like this. I believe LA was already talking about, figuring out ways to actually recycle their sewage into, filtered water.
So is that part of the brand proposition, or is that sort of like a hidden fact about the product?
No, I mean, it's clearly not on the, can itself there, but they don't hide it at all. Yeah, it's definitely something they're very open about.
Well, they show all these like sort of public like things of water in the background to sort of clue you in on what might be going on.
And then speaking of recycling water, so this is here in the States. So this is Martin House Brewing Company out of Texas, but you might have seen this. This was in the news a bit, but they are going to recycle hot dog water and they're going to turn it into hard seltzer. So they actually just got into hard seltzer. I believe this is the second variety of hard seltzer they're doing. And so they're using, it's something like 50 or 60 pounds of hot dogs. And they're turning the, actually cooking the hot dogs in the water. And then they use that hot dog water to create this hard seltzer. And they said it does taste like hot dogs. It's not, so filtered that you don't actually get that hot dog taste out of it.
So is the goal to just get like some, TikTok virality, or is it, do they think they're going to be around in 10 years with this product?
No, I think it's pretty quick. Let's get some attention. I think they're going to put it, at a bunch of festivals in Texas. And then this is actually a video, so I don't know if there's sound to it, but
yeah, it doesn't. I don't think I can get it to play. So you gotta, you gotta describe it.
Was that, yeah, if anybody has a chance to Google this after the webinar. So I actually saw this in restaurant hospitality, and I think it's interesting. So in the mid-year trend report, we have a section called data surprises, which is basically, you know, anytime that somebody at the company saw a piece of data that really surprised them. And Sam Desjardins, who's on our team, one of the things that really surprised her was that 70% of people who have used a QR code to bring up a menu or to pay at a restaurant said they really liked the experience. So I think, you know, a lot of the times you hear everybody hates QR codes, let's get rid of them. But actually people have pretty good experiences with QR codes. And I think, you know, if you think about the fact that they're probably not going away anytime soon, you think through, you know, so what do we do with them? How do we improve them even more? So this is actually what's the hotel chain? I believe it is the Hilton in Pensacola, Florida. They are actually, yeah, Pensacola Beach Hilton. So they are using videos as part of their QR codes. And like, if you actually watch the video, it looks like a really slick, like high-tech trailer of the chef behind the scenes creating dishes. So there's two different concepts at the hotel itself. There's a sushi bar and a pool bar at the place. And they said that orders for the two dishes that they have a video for have increased, you know, by leaps and bounds now that they've did it. I think it's just a really cool, you know, kind of way to use some of the technology that we have at our disposal in a new way that really engages with consumers.
Yeah, and if you talk to consumers and we do surveys on this, one of the things that they most want to have in sort of an online menu or a mobile menu that they don't often get is pictures of every single item.
Mm-hmm.
So we got some improvements we can make there still. What the heck is this?
And finally, we got to end with a really weird one. So this is the peanut push. So this is the first person in the 21st century to complete the peanut push, which is pushing a peanut up to the top of Pikes Peak with your nose. So you can see this is the fellow here that actually did it. He used that the apparatus that's attached to his nose there. He started on July 9th, and on July 15th, he finished the peanut push. So he actually pushed that peanut all the way to the top of Pikes Peak. And it has been done before. There was somebody in the 60s that did it, somebody in the 20s that did it, but this is the first person in the 21st century to have pushed that peanut all the way to the top of Pikes Peak.
And before you react by saying, well, why would anyone waste their time doing this? Recognize it's probably a monumental achievement, right? Like the amount of training and patience to do it. Like there's something
it sounds
about
horrible. I mean, you see pictures of him. He stooped over. He has to have that thing on his nose. Like, yeah, he deserves all the attention that he gets because it seems like, I mean, it took him, you know, how long there. So yeah,
it's the pinnacle of human achievement. Okay.
All right.
Trends.
All right. And so yeah, we're going to go through them pretty quickly. I want to make sure that we get through everything. But basically, our mid-year trend report is kind of our opportunity to look at what happened in the past 6 months of the year, you know, dive into, you know, what grew on menus, you know, what LTOs did really well over the year. And then also give you the data that you need to really plan for the next 6 months of the year. And then we also kind of include some fun stuff in there. So we, as Jack said, we literally just released this in Report Pro this morning. And so I would say, you know, what we're going to cover today is maybe 1/5 of what's in the actual report. So I really would encourage everybody to get in Report Pro and download it. And so the very first section that we included in the report is a section called What Consumers Will Do. And the idea behind this is, you know, as we talk to a lot of clients, as we talk to a lot of operators, you know, I think everybody was just so confused about, you know, where consumers going to go in the future. On the one hand, you know, there's all this pent up demand, you know, for a while, you know, COVID, yeah, I know we talked at the beginning of the hour about, you know, some COVID regulations coming back, but most of them have dropped across the country. And so, you know, there was this idea that everybody's going to rush back to restaurants and recreational venues. But then at the same time, you know, you see the higher prices, you see, you know, looming recession. And so I think people are really confused about what consumers really do plan to do in the future. And so this was a battery of questions that we asked of consumers, you know, what do you plan to do? Where do you plan to visit? And what do you plan to purchase? And so if we go to the next slide here, and this I'm literally only covering, you know, maybe a 10th of what's in the actual report itself, but we get into each of the various segments. But there are two overarching things that I really want to kind of drive home. Number one, Gen Z is more willing to do everything in the future than any other demographic. There's almost no question that we asked that Gen Z didn't say, yes, I either plan to visit that more in the future or I plan to purchase that more in the future. And it tends to hold across generations. So the younger you are, kind of the more open you are to doing anything. The other thing is for a lot of these, most consumers do say that they're either going to visit them at the same pace that they currently do, or they're going to purchase them at the same pace. But the nuances are in those consumers who say that they're either going to visit more or visit less, or purchase more or purchase less, because that's going to drive those changes in the future. So for some of these, you'll see, a pretty clear trend story that there's, more consumers who say that they're going to either visit more or purchase less, or vice versa. So this is the question we asked, are consumers going to visit QSRs or fast food restaurants more often in the future? And you see that, a quarter of Gen Z says that they're going to visit more in the future, and then it drops off for each successive generation. I think the hard one about this is that, if you look at consumers overall, 22% of consumers say that they're going to visit QSRs less overall. Only 13% of consumers overall say that they're going to visit more. Fine dining restaurants on the other end of the spectrum. I think, a lot of people are wondering if, a recession is looming. Are, consumers really going to be eating at fine dining restaurants again? And, the story here again is pretty mixed. So over a fifth of consumers do say that they're going to visit fast food restaurants less. But you do see, that same percentage of consumers, of Gen Z consumers, saying that they're going to visit fine dining more, which, that's a cohort of consumers who they are going to work now, they are graduating school, they do have a little bit more purchasing power. So I think we're going to see them, start to purchase more higher end products. I think it's, unsurprising, but, when we actually looked at, various income levels, high income level earners were twice as likely to say that they're going to visit fine dining restaurants more in the future than either middle income or lower income consumers. Will consumers visit buffets? I think this is a real question of interest, just because buffets were such a symbol of, what consumers didn't want during the pandemic. So will things change? Again, not necessarily great news. So a quarter of consumers say that they're going to visit, buffets less. We do see quite a few Gen Z consumers saying that they're going to visit more. I think that surprises people because you don't necessarily consider buffets as something that really resonates with younger consumers, but they experience them at, CNU, they see them, at their, business in the B&I cafeteria. And so I think that makes sense. We did a study a few years ago on buffets, and they actually scored really well with millennials. Millennials thought they were a good value, and they liked the idea that they could bring their entire family and everybody can choose what they like. So actually, as we possibly head into a recession, there is that opportunity to kind of show that value proposition to the millennial cohort. Will consumers order third-party delivery services more often or less often in the future? Another one I think everybody's looking at. If you ask all of the third-party delivery services, almost all of them say, yeah, orders are down. I think that's inevitable as consumers go back to restaurants. But, they also all say that, numbers are still well above what pre-COVID levels were. So, overall, if you're judging it by pre-COVID, I think third-party delivery is here to stay. I think the really interesting thing here, too, is that question of, have you ever purchased from a third-party delivery service? And only 10% of Gen Z consumers say they've never purchased third-party delivery and that they don't plan to. And nearly 60% of boomers say the same thing. So you can see, what those, kind of answers will foretell for the future of third-party delivery. Will consumers visit discount stores? So, I think this is a key question as prices are high, as we head into a recession, possibly, knock on wood. And I think, the numbers are pretty clear. There are more consumers by about double who say that they're going to visit more often. But actually, the interesting stat here again is those Gen Z consumers. 40% of Gen Z consumers say that they're going to visit discount stores more often. It's actually the #1 concept of all of the various locations that we tested that Gen Z consumers said that they're going to visit more often. And then will they eat healthier in the future? So this is one, it's always aspirational. Consumers always tell us, yep, we're going to eat healthier. We like the idea of eating healthier. And then they go to a restaurant and that cheeseburger just looks too delicious. And that's what they end up choosing. But this actually is the question that the highest percentage of consumers say that they were going to purchase more in the future, which is 39% of consumers overall saying that they do want to purchase healthy foods more often. And, even if that's not what they choose, I think there's a lesson here for the aspirations that consumers have and kind of how we can meet their needs in the future.
I think aspiration is the right word. I won't go quite so far as to say it's a lie, but consumers, this is one area where consumers often say they want to do one thing and then they get derailed. So here's an interesting stat, and this comes from the world of restaurants. and I may be off by 1 or 2 percentage points, but it's pretty close to this. Something like 60% of the time when a consumer says, I'm going to eat healthy when I go to a restaurant, they say that something derailed them from that healthy behavior. They either saw a delicious burger going by, on someone else's tray and it swayed them towards that, or something else. So the intent is there, but there are so many easy ways to get persuaded to try something other than what that original intent was.
And we saw that so often in the past. I remember we did the snacking keynote years ago, and what people thought they snacked on, and then what they actually snacked on when we asked them to keep diaries. I mean, it was night and day differences. Absolutely.
Yeah, one of the top snack foods in America is a hamburger, which is not a snack food, I think, in any other part of the world, but here it's a snack food.
Will consumers go on more vacations? Something we've been talking a lot about, as we head into the summer season. I think these are interesting numbers. I think kind of the prevailing idea out there was, consumers couldn't wait to go back, get on flights again, go on road trips again. And there, is that percentage of consumers who do say that they're going to purchase more trips in the future, but it's a fairly high equal percentage of consumers who say that they're going to purchase them less. We've been hearing from the airline industry. So I think United, it was just yesterday, said naturally have hit profitability in the last quarter for the first time since COVID began. And you see it if you go to the airport, the airports are absolutely swamped. On the other hand, flight prices are incredibly high right now. Airlines are cutting service because they don't have workers. Gas prices are insane, so people aren't necessarily driving. So you kind of do have these, countervailing forces that are really pushing consumers in two different directions. Will consumers visit movie theaters? I think we just, thought this was interesting. This is kind of a segment that there's, I think, going to be a lot of changes in the future. This is the highest percentage of consumers who said they plan to completely stop visiting this segment in the future. So actually 10% of consumers said that they don't plan to visit movie theaters ever again in the future. And so we did see some movies this summer do pretty well. Some of those blockbusters actually hit some box office records. But overall, the number of releases are way down. Overall, people are staying home a bit. I think, we're absolutely seeing a number of movie theaters across the country that are switching things up. Some are even considering playing TV shows week to week just to try to get people into seats. So I think we're going to see a lot of changes here.
I'll say Top Gun was a great movie-going experience, but the next one I'm probably looking forward to that would actually get me into the theater is if they release a Paddington 3. I'm enjoying stuff at home.
Surely they will. And then, so there's, if you work in the mall segment, I know this is probably unsurprising to you, but will consumers visit them more or less often in the future? This was the highest percentage of consumers who said that they will visit less often in the future. So 30% of consumers saying that they're going to visit malls less often. You do see, some of those younger consumers, nearly a quarter of Gen Z, saying that they're going to go, more often in the future, but it's not going to, equal out to the number of consumers who aren't going. You see a lot of changes in this category, a lot of malls, alternate uses for malls. You'll also see a number of brands who primarily work in this category, looking at alternate venues. So Auntie Anne's has the co-branded Jamba Juice drive-thrus. Now, I think you're going to see a lot more of that in the future.
Yeah, repurposed malls are a thing. You're going to see a lot more of that in the future. But if you go to a dying mall, it's really one of the most depressing
so sad
things.
Yeah.
It's really, really sad.
Yeah. All right, and now I'm going to turn it over to Claire, who's going to talk through the menu winners.
Okay, let's just get to it. This is my most favorite time of the year. I love talking menu winners. So, all right, so our first one, and this one kind of surprised me because we've had hard seltzers have been top for a number of years, just kind of fighting back and forth. This year it was ranch water. I realize that's not all that unrelated to a hard seltzer, but that one did become our top for the past 12 months. And then some activity happening there is people are, there's more ready to drink, of course, and then some new flavors happening. And then as far as menuing is happening with this, they're actually starting to offer it with, instead of Blanco, which is the classic, with some reposado and añejo tequila. So
are we seeing this in chain restaurants too? Or is this really more like an independent cool bar type of thing?
Not happening a ton in chain restaurants. I know, I think it was last year, Buffalo Wild Wings introduced one, and in those they're tending to not necessarily use Topo Chico. In that case, it was the Q seltzer that they use, but so far not too much activity there.
And Claire, what you just mentioned really quick, that these come from the annual MenuTrends update, which which I know is now quarterly.
Yeah, so I didn't know how much we wanted to reveal that. I get to have my favorite day of the year 4 times now because we're actually updating our MenuTrends data 4 times a year. So I get to play with the data and find out what won. It used to be my favorite day of the year, and now it's my favorite day of the quarter. So I got to play in the data more often. So we're very excited about that. This is from the release that just happened. I think it was like a week or so ago. We really got pushed to get this out to all of you here on the call. And then it looks like there's when I said no chains are doing it, I meant bigger national chains. And there's several folks in the chat noting that within cuisine type, there's a number that are doing that. So like On the Border, Uncle Julio's, some of your within cuisine type do have it. And then we have birria, which I've said several times, and I'm practicing saying better and better. That one's growing super quickly, and this one is particularly funny. I don't know when this was starting to be a trend, and we were talking about putting it on a menu adoption cycle. Some folks on the menu adoption cycle group where we have these conversations, Carly isn't with the company more, but she said, this is going to happen. Another person backed her up, and I said, it's goat. This can't happen. It can if it's beef, and it is, and it will, and it does. So I was wrong on that one. So now it's the stew, not typically made with the goat meat anymore, but beef. And it's being used in the same way that carnitas did and barbacoa did, where it's no longer the core protein or dish. It's now becoming the flavor and kind of that essence. So you can do this to basically anything. And you can, as shown here, it's common to serve still that soupy consomme on the side so that you get that dipping experience and kind of that fun message.
So yeah, we've seen exactly that, right? Traditionally it's goat, but now you're seeing other meats and short ribs and whatnot.
Exactly. It's like, that will never happen. It's goat. But when you switch it to something more approachable, yes, it will happen, because who doesn't like long cooked meat?
Like a
jackfruit.
taco meats French dip sandwich, sort of.
Yep. Yeah. And then we have High Noon Seltzer. We do typically try to avoid brands, but this one was too obvious to avoid as one of our call outs. High Noon is just outpacing the entire ready to drink cocktail category, which is starting to flatten out. They are going above and beyond. And then once you add in seltzer, they still manage to be fourth. And it's got a little bit of kind of how Spindrift had like its moment with the fruit juice. That's kind of the same idea here. This is vodka and real juice, and that has appealed to a particular consumer.
Cool.
This one I'm really excited about. Mango Nada is now finally hitting enough that it shows up when I do my search. And this one is particularly fun because it does have that sweet, salty, and spicy. It is sometimes called, I always, despite, so chamoyada, but we apparently as Americans on the whole know mango more. So that's what's being coming out more than the other. And it is a popular flavor in Mexico for like a paleta and ice pop. And now we're actually seeing it. You can see here, Tarani makes the product, and then it's actually becoming a beer flavor over this summer. There's a lot of that activity, including even a non-alcoholic one introduced by Athletic Brewing in their like pilot program, and people are loving them. And of course, some people hate them. It's a spicy, sweet thing, but if that's your thing, you love this flavor profile.
So is the American version you'd find here similar to what you'd find in Mexico, or was it sort of changed along the way?
It's still pretty similar. Like the Baskin Robbins product that is, Baskin Robbins has done it the past 2 years. It's actually very similar, the same like puree mango layer of the chamoy, and then the spicy tahini on the edge isn't quite as pronounced, but same idea.
Awesome.
Ube, we're excited. Ube is back on the list. We've been talking about ube and its other bright colored Filipino friend pandan for years now, wanting it to finally take off. And we think this is really truly the moment. TikTok agrees with us, and so does the introduction. And it wasn't just a flavor of the month. Baskin Robbins introduced this as a permanent flavor. You can find it at most of them, at least here in the city. They have a flavor, I forget, it's ube swirl. And it was the first thing my daughter chose to order because it's a pretty purple swirled item. And I told her it was going to be like sweet potatoes, only more sweet and even more delicious. And she was sold, and apparently lots of other people are too. So this one we think will keep going because of its stunning color and taste profile.
So Filipino, would we call it Japanese as well, or really just Filipino?
I'm really going to go with more Filipino. There is like the Japanese purple sweet potato, though that's a different concept. They're like from different families, and there's a Hawaiian one, but this is definitely more Filipino in general profile.
That's awesome.
And this one might be the only one that I actually have to explain. The others we probably have seen before. Chicken 65 has been slowly creeping up, at least on Indian menus for a couple years now. It's so much so that I had to double check with our menu team and be like, we haven't changed how these menus look, right? There's so much more of this particular cuisine. Something weird is happening. They're like, nope, nothing weird. This is happening. And I think that the Indian cuisine operators were like, I think this is delicious. I think it really works. It can be an appetizer or an entree, and it's just deep fried chicken pieces. And you end up putting it with a spicy chili garlic sauce. Some regions do yogurt to kind of thicken up the sauce and tenderize the meat and have a cooling effect, but not all of them do. Some people in the chat are noting you can do it with cauliflower. So sometimes you'll see gobi 65, and then some debate on why it is called 65. That is not covered in the report because nobody is quite sure. It may have been invented in 1965. You might cut the chicken into 65 pieces. There's a bunch of other stuff.
I'm glad we saw this because I've noticed this. Like, it seems like every Indian restaurant I go to now has this on its menu. I'm like, but this is not an American invention. This is actually something you'd find in India.
Correct. It is from the Chennai Hotel, I want to say, Buhari Hotel in Chennai. That's where it came from, or where the legend says it does. And now lots of people are starting to feature it, and it's got some Nashville hot momentum behind it. So maybe it'll keep going.
Interesting.
Which is why I'm excited to introduce this one. The report also covers, from some of our Datassential experts, some trends we're tracking, varying across our different fields of expertise. Mine is the Indian cuisine evolution. And I'm super excited about it. I've been watching it in the data, kind of hesitant even to write about it in some reports because I saw so much shift. And it looks like not very much when we look at the numbers on the left-hand side, which means opportunity. Doesn't it seem surprising that there's all these delicious flavors in Indian cuisine and we're always, what's the next cuisine? What's going to happen? When will it finally be Indian food? And slowly but surely, now we have turmeric. Chai is like proliferation ubiquity, depending on the situation. So there's a lot of opportunity for some of these flavors on the left-hand side that have some more familiarity, like your chutneys. And then as far as what's trending at Indian restaurants, this is where it gets really interesting because you start to see South Indian and your Indo-Chinese stuff starting to grow. And what we notice in our data is once you see growth within the cuisine type, you start to know what's coming next. So the left-hand side ends up being, that's the approachable stuff. We can innovate on that right now. The stuff on the right-hand side, that's what we should be keeping an eye on, and how it's described too. So something like milk dumpling, that's gulab jamun, but we don't want to call it that because nobody knows what it is. So we're going to call it milk dumpling now. So it gives you some hints as to how to describe things and where things are headed. And you start to see that emphasis on lentils and certain cuisine types.
Claire, would you say that Indian restaurants themselves are becoming a bit more innovative and adapting and updating their menus? It seems that.
That's definitely true. And that's why I was like, maybe it's just that we had a couple COVID closures and we had to replace with these really cool new Indian restaurants that are happening. And that's not the case. These are actually some long-standing Indian restaurants who are like, our cuisine is well known enough that yes, I'll still have saag paneer because everyone orders that. And I'll have this thing that I actually really love, like chicken 65 or any of these other dishes.
That feels right to me. I feel like there's probably some cuisines where you maybe have like a very long-standing traditional Chinese restaurant where the menu just never changes, but I feel like Indian menus tend to evolve a little bit more.
Yes, I think they do. I actually have seen it happening across all of our operators, even though we're not changing who's in the database. They're all starting to do more flexing and starting to show off where the family themselves is actually from, if it's a family-owned place.
That's pretty cool. And big movers.
Yeah, we are running out of time here. Okay, keep going, keep moving. This is just a reminder of our menu adoption cycle. Mike picked the snack one to show off in the report today, but this is, we'll talk about some movement. The idea being, of course, the trends start in inception and some lucky trends move to adoption. And once they're there, they often slowly but surely keep moving through the menu adoption cycle until we get to ubiquity where they are everywhere. Affogato. This was a year for it where it moved into adoption. And this one is sort of a little hard to prove as it's still in a very distinct set of people. And it was actually like a year or two ago where it started to move. You know, what's not to like about pouring some espresso over gelato, where ice cream is more common here. And there were a number of operators that did it. It doesn't like to travel. So I wouldn't say it had the biggest past 2 years, but it really wants to. And it's starting to lead to another trend, which is always a sign that a trend is moving on. We're starting to see hints of Australian iced coffee, which is basically coffee, iced coffee getting the float treatment. So iced coffee with ice cream, which also sounds delicious and like it might travel a little bit better.
I'm surprised affogato hasn't become like a flavor of things.
I tried to think about it, but like, wouldn't it just be coffee ice cream? You could call it.
It would. Well, in that case, yes. Yeah.
I tried to make it happen, but I couldn't find it happening. Maybe it's out there. Dessert hummus is another one where you're like, dessert hummus adoption, really? With hummus moving to ubiquity, it just makes sense. And when you look at the major brands, they agree. You know, Target's Good and Gather brand has it, Boar's Head has it, and they don't just have chocolate hummus, which is the classic because chocolate makes it taste a little bit less like chickpeas, which I happen to not mind, but everyone would prefer a little bit more chocolate flavor. Boar's Head actually does like apple pie and pumpkin pie flavors seasonally. And this one would be really good for some of your other food service like schools and CNU.
That's great.
Oh, and then Stephanie, and an aside, mentioned green chickpeas. If you have not tried green chickpeas, you absolutely should. They're basically like little shishito pepper application that you can do. Crab Rangoon had another big year, adoption to proliferation, and lots of this was driven by social media. Particularly, I cannot say this person's last name, so I will refer to them by their handle. Sloth Girl 420 showed a video. She's definitely one of those people that just like crunches into things. She was doing it and everyone was like, oh, that looks crunchy and delicious. And so all of the Gen Z people were like, I've never heard of Crab Rangoon before. It's really easy to make in my air fryer. And so a whole new generation learned to love Crab Rangoon. And a bunch of operators started changing it into a flavor. So we have Crab Rangoon pizzas outside of that one operator in Des Moines that has always done it. And then Crab Rangoon dip as well.
So we look in our flavor data set, I would bet that Crab Rangoon is less popular with the younger generation than it is with boomers, for instance. I don't know, we can probably verify that. But this shows you can take something that, you know, is been around for a long time, people don't know it very well in a newer generation, and it becomes popular because of social media in some way. Now, I think the most boomer skewing food we've seen in any of our data sets is a Waldorf salad, which boomers like and Gen Zers have no idea what it is. So maybe the next TikTok star is gonna make Waldorf salad a thing for Gen Z. We'll see.
Egg bites moved to proliferation. This one driven primarily by huge activity at retail. Almost if you make egg or protein, you make these now. And I'm going to skip to the next one, trying to hustle us. And Greek yogurt, yes, Greek yogurt has finally made it into ubiquity. Some of you are surprised it was not there all along, but it did. It finally made it. And it's now being used primarily in sauces as far as new applications. So if you could do new flavors or look to new global yogurts.
I've been trying to find frozen Greek yogurt and it's very, very hard to find. Like frozen yogurt, like a frozen yogurt shop with frozen Greek yogurt. Just can't find it. It's delicious when you do that.
A classic tart, but not easy.
The tart, yeah. All right, and I'm going to move fast too. We have 9 minutes to go, but this is a fun section. So if you know our scores database, it's every single new LTO, new menu item and test item offered by major chains, and we just test the heck out of them. So this is every LTO release this year so far, and we pulled out the ones that scored the highest in their particular metrics. So the next one on the next screen here. So we actually have a composite score that we put together. We take into account all of the various metrics for each dish, and we actually pull a composite score together. So there were 16 items released this year that scored a 99 in their composite score, but there was only one item released this entire year that scored a 99 in both purchase intent and uniqueness. So it was an item that everybody wanted, and it was an item that you had to go to this particular operator to get, and it's this Kyoto Bloom cocktail from P.F. Chang. So this is kind of our menu winner of this first 6 months of the year so far.
Amazing.
And then we'll go through each of the metrics here really quick. So this is the highest rated item in purely purchase intent. So it is unbranded purchase intent. So consumers didn't know that it came from Red Lobster, but it scored the highest. 71% of consumers said that they want to purchase this dish from Red Lobster, which is the ultimate endless shrimp. I think it's interesting because one, we don't often see a lot of seafood dishes overall offered, at major chains, and yet the highest rated item is a seafood item. The other thing that's interesting about it is actually, if you look at our flavor database, which is every single food and flavor, and we test the heck out of it with consumers, 70% of consumers say they like shrimp. So actually this item scored higher than the number of consumers who like shrimp, and it's a shrimp dish actually. So I think that's kind of an interesting.
Because you get endless variety too, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, you can do all the different preparations, which is awesome.
Mm-hmm. The highest, this is always my favorite one to look at, which is the most unique item, or the option that consumers rated the most unique. This was the pepperoni pizza egg sandwich from Einstein Brothers, which 71% of consumers said it was unique. It's not even that unique of an item. It's basically just taking pizza flavors and putting it, into a breakfast application. And they already mentioned that consumers eat pizza for breakfast. So it just goes to show that it's only a little bit of innovation that you have to do to get pretty high uniqueness scores. There's also scored pretty well in branded purchase intent. So over half of their consumer base wants to purchase this item. So high scores overall for this pepperoni pizza egg.
Einstein pizza bagels are delicious. The green chili one is spectacular. Yeah, good stuff.
The next one is frequency. I think this one is very interesting. One, you don't have to score very high to score high in frequency overall. There are very few foods that consumers say that they want to purchase all the time. But this is actually the highest scoring option in frequency. So this is the #1 option that consumers said that they want to purchase all the time, offered at a major chain this year, which is the Beyond Fried Chicken from KFC. So actually the top 3 options that won in frequency were all chicken or plant-based chicken options. So it goes to show how often consumers eat chicken. But actually a couple of the options that came out on top were plant-based options. So I think it goes to show that for some of these indulgent foods, if it is a plant-based option, sometimes it gives that consumer a little bit of permission to eat it all the time. And then draw. So this is, would you go to this operator specifically for this item? And again, it was the ultimate endless shrimp. So I have to assume that this did really, really well for Red Lobster. But, 66% of consumers said that they would go to Red Lobster specifically for this option. The one that we don't include in here is value. All of the top options that, score really high in value are $1. So if you want to score really high in value, offer something at that $1 price point. And then the last option, which is a newer metric that we introduced during COVID, which is delivery appeal. How appealing do you find this option for delivery? The top 20 options were all pizza. So if you want to offer, something on the menu that consumers perceive to be a good option for delivery, it should be pizza. And the top scoring option was the big dinner box from Pizza Hut, which they brought back a few times now. So it clearly does really well for them.
That's awesome.
And then really, really quick, fall and winter flavor preview. It's hard to believe, but we're probably only a couple of weeks away from some of the fall releases. Last year, Cracker Barrel introduced their fall themed items on August 10th. You had Dunkin' doing them on August 18th. You had Starbucks on August 24th. So August is, not just pumpkin spice season, but it happens earlier and earlier every year. So we're just a couple of weeks away right now. If we look at some of the data here, we can see what's happening. So pumpkin spice is down just a bit on menus. We have seen it plateau overall. I mean, it's a go-to item for the fall season. We see it in a lot of mashups now, pumpkin chai, pumpkin marshmallow. Last year there were still 174 pumpkin LTO releases in the fall. So
I think last year you saw flavors like apple become a bit more popular, right?
Yeah, and that's actually the next slide here. So you can see here, we saw 53 Apple LTO releases in the fall. Both Dunkin' and Starbucks did Apple releases. Apple is down a bit overall on menus over the course of the year. It's up a bit in the fall season. And in particular, we see a lot more menuing of particular varietals. So actually Granny Smith apples are the highest indexing fruit option on fall menus. So, and the reason for this is because if you're releasing all of these options really early in the season, it's probably still hot outside. And so a lot of these operators are releasing cold, drinks and options. And so fruit, flavors work really well in those. So we see a lot more apple cranberry. We also see a lot more of the pumpkin cold brews as opposed to the pumpkin lattes hitting menus. And then this, I won't get into this. This is a great option to have. We're going to upload this to Report Pro. But, if you are doing some innovation around sweet flavors, and then the next slide here is savory flavors on menus, for the fall and winter seasons, these are some great options to start with. These are all the highest indexing options for these particular seasons. And then the very last section. So this is kind of the fun section. And I'd like to hear in the chat, I'm so glad we have the chat working, if people, kind of consider themselves to be a good proxy for the population overall, are they, so these are binary questions that we ask consumers. Are you a morning person? Are you a night person? Do you eat healthy? Do you eat unhealthy? And it's just kind of interesting to see, where consumers are right now. But people get really passionate about one side or the other when you ask these questions. So we asked that question, are you morning people or night people? And, a little bit more of the population says that they're night people overall, but the differences are quite stark if you look at generations. So the younger you are, you're far more likely to be a night person, which probably doesn't surprise many people. But it not just impacts what you're putting on the menu, it also impacts your workforce as well. If you consider, if you have a younger workforce, they might work better in the evening, actually. I think this is actually a surprising level of self-awareness. So, we talked about this earlier, consumers want to eat healthy. Do they consider themselves healthy eaters? So 53% of consumers consider themselves to be healthy eaters, but almost the same percentage. It's almost a 50-50 split here. Consumers consider themselves to be unhealthy eaters, and younger consumers in particular are pretty aware that they're not necessarily the healthiest eaters. So, that they do aspire to eat healthy, but there's a good percentage of consumers who know they don't always choose the healthy option. This is of all the questions that we're including in the webinar today, this is either the biggest skew or the second biggest skew. I think this is a surprising number. 67% of consumers consider themselves to be introverts and 33% consider themselves to be extroverts. And it's actually a larger number of younger consumers consider themselves to be introverts. I believe it's 74% of Gen Z considers
social media.
Introverts. Yeah,
Social
don't want
media.
to talk on phones. We actually did a CNU report, and it was shocking the number of CNU, consumers or students who said that they ate alone for their last meal. So, an introverted generation. Very relevant to our industry, 65% of consumers prefer chocolate to 35% of consumers preferring vanilla, but this is tightening up a bit. So younger generations is actually a little bit more split, half and half. I think a lot of that is because vanilla is such a go-to flavor in so many of the cold beverages that younger consumers like these days. 70% of consumers loving cooking versus the 30% who hate it. Millennials were the most likely to say they like cooking. Nearly 3/4 of millennials say that they enjoy it. This is something we definitely saw change during COVID. So a number of consumers found that they really enjoy cooking over the past 2 years. And then the only question that we asked that we got a pure 50-50 split. So half the consumer base says they like salty foods, half the consumer base likes sweet foods. So you either have to put both on the menu or you have to put an option on the menu that includes both salty
And sweet foods probably skew more towards Gen Z and
yes,
salty
yeah,
towards
younger
boomers.
consumers, yeah. And our very final question, just kind of a fun one. Are people dog people or are they cat people? And I'm sure people in the comments will have a lot of, opinions about this, but most of the population does consider themselves to be a dog person.
That's the right answer, isn't it?
I knew you were going to have an opinion about it.
Is that objectively the right answer? I think it might be. Mike, Claire, thank you to everyone else. We sort of almost finished on time. Thank you for sticking with us. Thank you for working through the technical glitch. We have an amazing webinar in a couple of weeks. It's going to cover a brand new keynote report from Report Pro called Food at Home. Don't miss it. We're going to look at all the dynamics of people eating in home, which impacts, of course, not just retail, but all of food service as well, with brand new research that will be debuting in just 2 weeks. So please join us then. And then right after that, 2 weeks after that, we have another amazing session that's going to go over our latest insights around inflation, supply chain, and labor as part of our One Table program.